Before this video begins, I just want to say a quick hello. Stick with me for a moment. I'm sort of setting the scene here. I'm gonna have to get past chapter 1 and then I'll explain what's going on in this video. So just stay with me for a second. It's just setting the mood, setting the stage for a moment. I'll talk to you in a second. The first thing we see in The Last of Us is normality. Sarah sleeping on the sofa and Joel bursting in late at night, seemingly so, on the phone to his brother about a contract they can't lose for his company or the company they seemingly work for. Sarah awakes in a panic and scrambles to give Joel a gift, a late one for his birthday, a watch. This of course leaves Joel speechless and the tension is broken by their caring, loving jokes towards each other. He talks about the watch being broken and it being a waste of time, while she mentions how she got the money through selling drugs and that she is now able to chip in with the rent at least. With this caring, calming aura in the air, Sarah slowly drops off again back to sleep and Joel picks her up and places her in her bed comfortably, with a caring moving off her hair which was lying on her face, saying a warmly and fatherly good night to her.
Good night, baby girl.
Sarah awakes disturbed from a chilling, uncharacteristic phone call from her Uncle Tommy, Joel's brother, demanding to speak to him before he is suddenly cut off the phone. At this point, Sarah is free to wander around the Miller home. There is a fairly everyday, natural, messy home that Joel and his daughter have made their place of safety together, with no signs of a mother in the picture. But that doesn't hold back or stop Joel from proving that he can be the best loving father that he can be without a mother being around, lifting Sarah to her best capabilities as shown in all the family pictures, with her holding trophies as a core memory that clearly is important for a sports loving father like Joel. Live news reports often seem too distant for most viewers, but an explosion so close to Sarah's home causing her street to rattle has her wondering exactly what is happening on this night. Police cars scurry, dogs bark, and Joel is still nowhere to be seen, even though mysteriously his mobile phone is ringing and demanding for replies. Sarah is alone and confused until Joel comes running through the garden door and reaching for the house's gun locked away in a storage box, commanding Sarah to stay away from the windows before it's too late. And it was. The neighbour Jimmy comes literally crashing through the garden door, raving mad and covered in who knows whose blood, Joel warning him as a friend to stay back, but like a dog with rabies he has to do the worst to protect Sarah. This is the first taste we get of Joel's oddly ready mind to do what he deemed is necessary to protect the ones he loves the most, even if that means killing someone without fully understanding the situation. And this demeanour is weirdly reinforced by how pretty calm he is in a yet tense situation, and even his brother Tommy driving up to the house in a truck like it's ready to go, like they were ready for this moment their whole lives. Calm prepared, calm survivalists, no matter what they are, they clearly know one thing, and that's that they need to get out of town as soon as possible. Sarah now forcibly a fly on the wall as the adults are now talking, Tommy and Joel discussing plans, what this thing could even be, Joel understanding these roads and directing the car like the back of his hand, holding back the darker details from Sarah's younger innocent ears. The blinding lights of burning homes and police cars raising the stakes as families just like Joel and Sarah are looking for help and looking for a ride out of town, but Joel demands Tommy that they refuse to help these families, as those in this car are just trying to survive as much as them, so who should be trusted at this point? Being stuck in a traffic jam, more infected make themselves known to Joel and Tommy, sending them into a panic, trying to avoid those running in the masses. Hard to tell what's the difference between the living and the infected. Bickering between them in a panic and unfocused, the car is then slammed off the street and left on its side, rendering it undrivable. And Joel regains consciousness, finding Sarah now with a broken ankle, and Tommy is nowhere to be seen. Joel is then attacked by an infected, which he is then saved suddenly by his brother Tommy, showing that these two boys are willing to become killers faster than most may think. Sarah's leg now hurting, you take control of Joel holding Sarah, running through a panicked crowd amongst humans and infected, both parties screaming and clamoring for survival as chaos has taken hold of this small town in Texas. Sarah's innocence is immediately stripped away from one night of chaos, and this is only the beginning of what this infection will bring. Joel and Tommy trying to stay clear-headed amongst the explosions and the screaming crowds, using the back alleys, but they were beat by the infected who are already lingering and waiting in the dark shadows, forcing Tommy to stay behind behind and holding them back, while Joel does what he can to try and escape with Sarah. Running alone, isolated in the dark, away from the light, Joel clutching Sarah while they are being chased by infected, shrouded by shadows, too many to even take on alone, running blind in the dark, and when all hope seems lost, they are saved by a light of a lone gunman willing to do his job, and that should be saving other humans as well. Faceless by mask and torchlight and armed to the teeth, a beacon of what humanity should be capable of when in these tough situations and how we could survive. But confused and pleading for help from this man, Joel overhears an order, and the uncertain change of body language from this man, Joel realizes what's about to happen. Turning his back to save Sarah, Joel tries to avoid the gunfire, taking a fall down the hill, letting go of Sarah, and the soldier chasing with intent to finish the job before Tommy saved Joel's life once again. But instead of celebration, he is brought to his knees by Sarah. Joel was not able to avoid the fire, and she is left there holding her stomach, bleeding out, clamoring, holding on to whatever life she has left, while Joel can do nothing but try and comfort her in this last moment, begging for her survival as she shrieks and panics. Joel tries to comfort her through this time, guide her back to health, demanding she would hold on just a little bit longer, but it's too late. She had already stopped moving and crying moments ago. Joel is left there a broken man with nothing, and in this night he lost Sarah, he lost his trust in humanity, lost his home, everything he knows, and he lost that special companionship we all strive to hold on to in our lives.
This was 3 weeks. I was bitten an hour ago and it's already worse. This is fucking real, Joel. I was close with his brother Tommy.
You ought to be thankful you're still drawing breath.
Fucking touch me!
It's all your fault, Henry.
Everyone I have cared for has either died or left me. Everyone fucking except for you. So don't tell me that I would be safer with someone else, because the truth is I would just be more scared.
The intro to The Last of Us is one of the most polarizing any player has ever seen. Despite Ellie's face being all over the cover and marketing, it's Sarah's death that feels like it comes out of nowhere in such a raw and emotional scene was unlike anything seen in the gaming industry at the time. I knew I was going to be late to the hype of the show, very late at this point, and I knew I needed to bring something fresh to the collage of essays said about The Last of Us on the internet. I was inspired by the show and left there thinking on how it morphed and shaped the themes of the narrative in a totally different direction that I feel like I never really paid attention to within the game itself, with each encounter, character and episode teaching Joel a new meaning of relationships and companionships all over again. Everyone he encounters on his journey are all linked to something or someone, and it's okay for Joel to learn from them and move on from Sarah's death and learn to love again. Trust, love, brotherhood, family, hate and fatherhood. I want to dive into the relationships and chapters of the game and see how they shape one of the most controversial video game characters of all time, but there's only one place to start, and that's in a new beginning. Waking up to a banging at the door, we're introduced to Joel's right-hand partner in survival, Tess. A strong, smart survivalist very much like Joel, making it by in the Boston walls. And with a quick conversation between two friends, we learn how far the morals of this world have fallen through the gaps. Tess grabs a half-empty bottle of whiskey, pouring the liquid and holding the glass with a familiar gesture as Joel turns down another drink. She explains that she was ambushed and beaten by an associate of theirs by the name of Roberts and his crew. This assault doesn't come as much of a surprise because this is just a part of the world that they live in now, and this is how they survive. With the practices of the world shifting and ending and people fighting and killing over scraps of food and food stamps, Joel and Tess now work in the shadows and behind closed doors to do what they must, even if that's chasing men and killing them without no second thought. And unfortunate for Roberts, he's clearly a very stupid man about to mess with the wrong people. On leaving the apartment complex, we're introduced to this brand new world. We get to learn a little bit more about the governing forces of Fedra, who are a fascist-like military group who believe they're doing the right thing even if that means putting innocents at risks. On top of that, you have a resisting force by the name of the Fireflies, who are of course the resistance to fight against the Fedra forces and causing harm to these communities who Fedra believe they're protecting. Joel and Tess very quickly cold shoulder both of these circumstances, as there's a lot of history between them and they're more focused on their own business, and with that they take a back door which very few clearly know about, leading straight to a storage room where they seem to be stashing some of their gun supplies. The relationship between Tess and Joel is pretty loose and fun. Despite the heavy trauma that Joel carries, there's history between these two characters that bring out a familiar young gleam through that tough exterior we're now getting to know. They crack jokes and talk about the past that they've endured with each other while navigating this world as a team and experienced survivalists, including dealing with the infected. In 20 years since the infection has started, it has embedded and literally become a part of the world that people are now living in the literal sense, with those like Joel and Tess who have the means and will to know how to avoid the infection and even deal with them in the best possible ways. Joel and Tess slip past the infected and finally make it to another shady part of town where the likes of these two could strive and survive easily. Tess clearly obviously has a presence here, as those who stand up and threaten Joel not knowing who he is quickly stand down as soon as she demands their attention. Though some people are clearly stupid enough and not really aware of what these two are capable of, and that is in the likes of those who hang around with Roberts. In search for Robert, they are then ambushed by 3 of his crew who have the goal to call Tess a bitch, and despite her warning to them to stand down, of course that doesn't end very well for them. I think the combat is important to address because I think it's a big part of Joel's character, as many may already know. The combat in Last of Us till the very end is a gritty, heavy affair, with Joel's calmer demeanour and understanding of human behaviour and reactions to certain actions that are taking place during stealth. Joel's ability and movement definitely stood out in 2010s, as you clamber around cover, slowly earning ground, taking out each enemy, choking them without remorse as they scratch, punch and pull and beg for the air to remain in their lungs, but Joel cares very little as he suffocates a man to death. It's very brutal, it's very realistic, and it's something that The Last of Us weirdly wears with pride, and so it should. It's fucked up. Tess and Joel chase down and find Roberts and corner him into an alley where he tries to give them a slip, but this isn't their first rodeo.
God damn it!
Without second thought, they send him flying to the floor and interrogate him for the locations for the guns that he promised them, but he stupidly tells them that he sold them to settle a debt, and as you can imagine, that didn't go well for him.
Give me a couple.
They learn that he sold them to the resisting group of the Fireflies and that they could easily go back and steal them from them, but Tess has other things in mind, bringing a swift, violent end to their business arrangements.
That is a stupid idea.
The intro and beginning segment doesn't really do much in terms of story other than teach us about what sort of people Joel and Tess are in this brand new world. After learning their guns were sold to the Fireflies, it just so happens to be that the leader of the Fireflies shows her face there and then in hopes of finding Robert, but as you can imagine, he's already knocking at death's door. Marlene mentions there was a deal that Robert was meant to see through, but now that he isn't available, they're gonna have to finish that deal themselves if they ever want any hopes of seeing those guns again. Sneaking through the city now with Marlene and Tess, they make their way to an abandoned hideout where we're introduced to the other main lead, Ellie. Joel and Tess learn that she needs to be smuggled if they want to get the reward of the guns and of course double the pay. But there's an extra personal caveat that's thrown into the mix here. Marlene actually mentions that she has history with Joel and his brother Tommy, promising and guarantee that Joel is the one who can be trusted, and with that Joel's guard is broken down, and despite questioning the intentions of the Firefly, Joel clearly understands a promise when made, and Tommy and Marlene need him there and then, and he has no choice other than to say yes. This is the first time we see Joel and Ellie alone together, with nothing more than small talk, specifically Joel's demeanour towards Ellie at this point, talking down to her like she's nothing more than a 12-year-old child despite being over 14 and just dreaming to be part of the resistance and wanting to be nothing more than a teenage rebel without no future ahead of her. But we know Ellie is more important than that, but Joel's not figured it out yet. On arrival to the safe house, Joel pretty much ignores Ellie and lays down for a rest, and Ellie notices he's still wearing his watch and points out that it's broken. Joel doesn't reply. That evening, Joel and Ellie await Tess's arrival, and Joel restlessly questions what's Ellie's intentions, but before anything is answered, Tess walks in and finds out where they're heading into the rainy night, to drop Ellie off outside the city walls and take her to the Capitol building. Fedra patrol the dark rainy night with a tough force, and Joel, Ellie and Tess are forced to make their way through the dangerous rainy outskirts of the Boston walls, but they are unfortunately taken off guard by the Federal forces, and after failing a bride check they are then forced to be scanned for any infections. The guards don't expect them to be infected, and Joel is clean, Tess is of course clean, but Ellie is quick to stab one of the guards, forcing Joel and Tess to kill them, and we learn that Ellie now is infected. But not only is she infected, but she also claims to be immune, and that's why she's being transported. Her blood could lead to possibly a vaccination in the future. But before anything deeper is answered, the gang is forced to run away from an onslaught of Federal forces who are now hunting them down. After escaping Fedra and getting out of Boston fully, Tess is willing to take a chance on the possibility that immunity in Ellie's system could be true, and that Marlene maybe has a plan. Joel here, on the other hand, having his history with Marlene and of course the Fireflies, is pretty hesitant to take this any further than it needs to go, willing to turn around and call it quits. Tess, realizing Joel's panic and fears, she takes him aside and just simply says to him, I get it. With Tess and Ellie now walking off, leaving Joel there alone, memories of his own daughter flooding his mind for a moment. This next chapter is more about world building. We learn about the clickers, we learn a little bit more about the environmental storytelling with all the zombies. That's not important to the narrative I'm trying to say. We're going to skip forward, but stuff happens. To avoid a recently alerted horde of infected, Tess, Joel and Ellie take cover in an old abandoned museum, where we learn in roaming dialogue from Ellie and Tess that Ellie was bitten while being in an abandoned mall, which she shouldn't have been, and was bitten by an infected. In a panic, she turned to Marlene, who she has known since a child, and of course the rest is history. Sneaking through the museum and being as quietly as they can, the group is attacked and split up by infected, both clickers and the running variants, with Ellie and Tess being together forced to make their own way through, while Joel survives on his own. After surviving against a handful of clickers, we come across Tess, who's been grabbed and ambushed by an infected, who she quickly pushes off him and kills, where she is seemingly okay and quick to run to Ellie's need. The group now together fight off the remaining infected and escape through the window to the rooftops. Here we see Joel and Ellie actually bond for the first time, pointing at the Capitol building and the ending finally being in sight. Joel asks if it's everything that she hoped for, and she replies with the jury still being out. Joel finds this pretty funny and chuckles, looking down at his watch, memories of Sarah coming back. But Tess quickly snaps him out of this memory, as she knows what he sees in Ellie and needs him to pay attention, as she seems pretty demanding of time. Drawing close to the Capitol building, tensions seem to be higher than usual with Tess. For example, when Ellie brings up the fact that the Fireflies might not even be there, Tess is very quickly to correct this and uncharacteristically just hope it all goes to plan. Making their way to the Capitol building, all is quiet, all seems out of place, and opening the door, Tess is then put into a manic panic, searching, confused, worried, and Joel catches onto something is very wrong about Tess's character and demands that she calms down, saying that this isn't them, they aren't known to do this. But Tess quickly shoots down all the history that they've gathered together in the last decade, and she looks at Joel and says she doesn't even know who they are. They're shitty people and they shouldn't be here in the first place. Joel, taken back by Tess's sudden reaction, he's angry and shouts that they're going home and that they can turn around, but Tess is upset and says that she's done, and Ellie realizes what is unfolding in front of her. She tells Joel that she was bitten in the museum, and this is why she's been acting so strange in the last few scenes. It's the very little time and hope that she has left to make a vaccination and hopefully see her mission through before it's too late. Grabbing Ellie now and convinced more than ever, she shows how quickly her bite has evolved compared to Ellie's, whose was weeks ago compared to just a few hours. This is where the history between Tess and Joel really comes together. She believes that there is enough history there that he needs to be obliged to her. He needs to make a promise to her. He will see that Ellie gets to wherever she needs to go to make this vaccination work, and Joel is left stunned in denial, and then Fedra quickly make themselves known. Tess here doesn't leave with a kiss or anything romantic. There is an obligation of a promise of friendship that's left behind between these two that Joel is almost in disbelief, but Tess knows this is her last final hours and wants to go out fighting, and she is unfortunately killed then by Fedra forces. What was that kissing thing about in the show? That's gross. Why did they... Ew. It's a long-winded first chapter, but it sets up everything we need to know about the relationships between Tess and Joel, and the relationship that Joel has with the people around him. Seeing who they were and the lengths of their trust, and even this element of an unspoken love for each other, it sets up her death really nicely and acts as a great insight and incident, not just for the narrative to truly begin with, but it acts as a way for the game to give Joel literally nothing left except a promise he made someone who he loved and a girl he knows nothing about. Joel at the end of the chapter is left speechless and frustrated with the fact that he lost Tess. Ellie is unable to even speak about her without him raising his voice. He gives such strict orders to Ellie that it seems like there is no way that these two can bond before they get to Joel's brother where they're heading, but first they're gonna need a car from an old friend. Despite me wanting to branch away from the show and how it handles its themes and characters separately from the game and its sequel, you can't understate the reaction and the changes that were brought to episode 3 with Bill and Frank. Both characters underwent serious changes from the version that we got to know, and even in ways that the plot is handled, Bill alone is a completely absent and different character, from focusing on a man with serious state of paranoia and a huge apocalypse complex, to seeing that archetype turn and grow over time into a loving, caring man for his partner Frank. The show takes the concept of these twos and shows us what was missing from this chapter in the first place. And to say in the end that the episode was maybe some of the best gay representation I've ever seen, and the handling and the writing and just the care between the love of two men surviving in this world, the episode itself and the narrative told is the highlight of the whole show, and maybe even hit higher heights than the game even wished of showing between Bill's character. But also it was a narrative that many agreed was the height of the series, and maybe even one of the biggest heights of The Last of Us as a franchise as a whole, that even went ahead and in many opinions surpassed the story that was told within the game's chapter itself. And by the end of the episode, I know for sure I was a mess. But that's not what we're here to talk about. Of course, let's jump into the game and let's talk about the narrative between Bill and Frank. Joel and Ellie, reluctant in their companionship, make their way to Lincoln, where Joel knows a man who could do them some favours. That man is of course Bill, someone who can help literally speed things up, get them a car and get them on their way to where they need to go. This chapter works first as both to see a way that Ellie and Joel communicate with each other and how they bond and get to know each other in this world, as Ellie's naivety and lack of understanding of the world before allows the dialogue between the two to become instantly charming, and Joel's deadpan delivery always sending a smile to the face. As they make their way through the town, we as the player and Ellie learns a lot more about Bill. He's a smuggler of all things junk and is a master of making booby traps around the town to keep outsiders and affected away. Joel does a lot to prepare Ellie for what Bill is like, as he knows that he has a lot to deal with and has serious trust issues, even more so compared to Joel, as shown to the player with all these traps, including one that sends Joel flying up in the air upside down, forcing him to cover Ellie while she tries to cut him down. Unable to do so and nearly overwhelmed by infected, they are then saved by a badass gas mask Bill, who wants Joel off his ass and on his feet. This chapter also sets a tone for just how much of a grip the infection still has on the country, with hordes of infected easily forcing people into isolation, and those who haven't got the skills like Bill or Joel easily being killed and taken over, but luckily Bill's got a better plan. Making it safely out of the horde and into one of Bill's many hideouts, he quickly cuffs Ellie to a pole and takes Joel down to the ground, and firsthand we see how he isn't really much of a people person, and there's obviously a reason why he's alone. Luckily, Ellie is able to break out and deter Bill's aggression towards her, and Joel then quickly takes control of the situation. Bill's paranoia and near manic emotions are now at full swing, and being hard to work with, Joel knows he's a good guy at heart and knows that he still owes him a favour, and he can tell that Bill isn't one to break a deal. Finally being able to communicate with Bill, calming both Bill and Ellie down, Joel is able to persuade him to lead them to a battery to get a car, and he now leads them the way through his booby-trapped neighbourhood. And we get more of an understanding during this following sequence of Bill's personality, violently killing infected like it doesn't matter and it's just a day job, questioning Joel and Ellie's intention without any trust, and just being a rude smartass whenever Ellie asks anything that she's curious about, which is a complete opposite to what we saw when Ellie and Joel were alone, when Joel was just given sincere answers before. Bill just likes to make sure that he's a bona fide asshole, and he kinda knows it. I think Bill's homosexuality is handled in such an interesting way, because him being gay really isn't a part of his character. It's not a staple of being like, oh, and he's gay. It's just he's gay, and it's handled very well, especially with an interesting piece of dialogue when Bill quotes,
"Bad as those things are, at least they're predictable. The normal people that scare me. You of all people should understand that."
What does that mean?
This is the first sign of weakness we actually get from him, and this is the first time anything about his sexuality may even come into question if you read between the lines of what he means. On a revisit, he's clearly referring to being abused for just being a gay man. He's clearly had trouble in the past with homophobia and people abusing him even since before the outbreak. It's a short, sincere, but a worthy bit of dialogue to note that really builds on his character and his past, and it gives you more of an understanding of his trust issues of people. Maybe he just prefers being around zombies because at least they'll kill you just because they're hungry and nothing else more. And Joel's acknowledgement of this statement and dismissal of Ellie's inquiries just proves even more there's more than just survival at stake with that sentence. Making our way to the second hideout, we get a little peek now into Joel and Ellie's relationship and the idea of Ellie getting her own gun, which Joel really isn't for. Despite her realistically needing to defend herself, Joel turns down the fact she's gonna have to one day use a gun for herself. I think this is another interesting comparison to bring in from the TV show. In the show, we see that Ellie is way more fascinated with the idea of using a gun and even exploring violence and seeking her boundaries when it comes to killing the infected, easily throwing away and disregarding her own innocence just for the sake of exploration of violence. It's not as heavily touched on in the game, but that's because we don't get to see as much of a personal side of Ellie than the show shows from her perspective. Joel jumps very quickly into becoming a fatherly figure with her life, wanting to protect her and keep her innocence in check, even though realistically and even in a sense of denial from Joel, her innocence was lost a long time ago. Here we unravel more of Bill's character and how he feels towards Joel, and in particular maybe even Tess. Bill tells a story of how he used to have a partner who he used to travel with, but makes a clear note of how it only ended up nearly getting Bill killed, and in turn to that story he thought that being alone would probably be the best way to survive, and people should be alone to survive. And of course with this story he's turning to Joel and telling him he probably will be better alone as well. It's a subtle moment, but it clearly speaks to Joel and his past, and of course even the hurt to still losing Tess, which Bill yet doesn't really know about. But Joel is pushed to emotions by this conversation and cuts Bill off quickly before he says something he might regret, and Bill quickly understands the message. Onwards from here they continue to the school, where interestingly Bill mentions he's never really been this far out of town, and we see more of a bond between Ellie and Joel grow, with more of a confirmation for Joel that Ellie's innocence is gone when seeing burnt bodies. She just shrugs it off and notes that she's seen worse, and Ellie also finds the time to comfort Joel and to let her know that she cares for him and is sorry about what happened to Tess. Joel tells her it's okay and clearly appreciates the concern she has for him. After sneaking through a graveyard and getting by infected and having to break their way into the school, they find the truck where Bill hoped to find a battery, but is shocked to find that it's already been taken by someone he knows very well. Here Bill is sent into an unpredictable panic, but they are forced to escape the school as the infected are closing in on them, and they also have to take down a new type of infected known as the bloaters. They are quickly backed into a corner where they are rushed into a neighborhood and then quickly into a back door of a home that Bill seems to know. After this shit show, Bill and Joel are sent to a boiling point where Bill drags Tess's name through the mud one too many times, sending the group into an argument where Bill quickly freezes and they find a corpse hanging. Joel, still worked up, confused, makes a comment towards Bill about the body, claiming he clearly knows him, and he can see that that comment maybe hurt a little deeper than he thought, very similar to how Tess's name touches Joel. In this scene, we learn that this body was Frank, Bill's ex-lover and partner. Bill cuts him down, points out how he knows him to the stage that he's the only person who would wear an ugly shirt like that, and continues to point out where he was bitten and why he took his own life. And the story between these two partners becomes so much more clear. We see Bill drop his guard, even shed a tear for his ex-partner, and quickly hides it again behind that hardened wall of a survivalist. But deep down we know he's just a broken-hearted man, and there was something deep, a bond between these two which we never truly got to see. We also discovered that of course it was Frank that had taken the battery from the school, because he knew that Bill would be too scared to go that far out of his safety zone, his booby-trapped Lincoln town, and Frank took advantage of that, took advantage of Bill, and took all he could while he was still alive. We also discover a letter that Frank had clearly written to Bill as well. A letter that points out the fact that Bill is so recluse, the fact that Bill can't allow himself to trust others, and in doing that he allowed him and Frank to be trapped and isolated in this small town forever, and Frank needed to get away from that, needed to get away from self-destructive personality and that trauma he clearly holds on to, understandably so, for being bullied and growing up gay and being attacked by so many for just him being who he was. And through this letter and this little moment, the lesson here for Joel has been learnt. Bill was strung up in his ways of being alone. He saw the world through trauma and distrust. Bill felt he was forced to be the way he was because of the problems that he faced in the world before and during the infection. Bill became recluse, staying in a town, locking himself away from the world, and Frank's love wasn't enough to break this mold of a man who had been so traumatized and who had grown so scared of others. There is a reflection here between Joel and Bill, and Joel realizes quickly that he could easily turn into Bill if he locked himself away from losing Tess and of course losing Sarah. He learns the lessons from Bill and how Bill has reclused himself, and in this moment he turns to Ellie when she's setting up in the car and tells her that she's doing a good job, and this allows for their relationship to blossom even further and allows Joel to accept that not everyone in the world is against you, therefore you should live life with an open heart. Joel, Ellie and Bill need to start the car, so they need to pop the clutch and get the car started, but they are forced of course into another horde battle while pushing the car downhill until they are safely out of there and able to drive away. Once clear of the infected and the car is good to go, they finally say their goodbyes. But reflecting on what Joel has learnt in the previous scene, Joel brings Bill aside and tries to say sorry about Frank, tries to offer a shoulder to lean on, very much like Ellie did with Tess. But Bill clearly is too far gone. He's too lost in his selfishness and his toxic demeanour. He cuts Joel off, tells him to get the fuck out of his town before walking away. And Joel recognises that stare in Bill's eyes. It's the same one that Joel's been holding on to for all these years. And he understands that it's okay to let go and welcome others into your life for comfort, for support, and for understanding. Joel and Ellie get back in the truck and leave Bill alone to his own devices, focusing on staying strong together because they're going to need it as there's a storm brewing. On a rainy night driving to Pittsburgh, Joel and Ellie have a small bonding session in the car. She has stolen a few of Bill's things, including a cassette tape for Joel to listen to, a comic book on which she's taken a bit of a liking to, and a men's possible porno magazine, which is swiftly tossed out the window, beginning this chapter. This is one of the most iconic and important moments seen in The Last of Us, and despite being very short and sweet, it's a light-hearted moment that lifts the game's spirits of the player and of course the characters between the chapters, and readying us for more of the serious tone the game is about to take. A small time jump ahead, coming into Pittsburgh, the road is closed and they are forced to make a stop, but Joel seems to sense something isn't right and something's off. They are forced then to take a totally different road which is open entirely by coincidence. Here they come across an injured man, and Ellie, of course being Ellie, is quick to wanting to help and get out the car, but Joel smells a trap and quickly tells Ellie to put on her seatbelts and begins to ram right through the man, where they are quickly ambushed by a gang of folks. Ellie and Joel are ripped from the car and Joel is forced to protect Ellie, and this is where things get nasty. We are shown a side of Joel that is unlike any other desperate situation he's been in thus far. As I said earlier on in this video, Joel is oddly ready and calm when it comes to being in battle and when it comes to having to kill someone. When he is cornered into a corner, he becomes one hell of a killer beast. Joel understands the battlefield almost with a cold calculation and knows what is needed and when is needed and what he needs to do to get a man killed, or get several. Crafting shivs, nail bombs, nailed bats, molotovs, he doesn't intend to leave a single person alive, and he has a deep degree of understanding when it comes to his guns too. He has a technical understanding of how to upgrade, make, arrange, clean and prepare guns for a battle, and you can understand why he's so reluctant to hand over a gun to Ellie so easily, as he fully understands the damage these things can cause to an innocent life. Joel from the start has never been shy to start blasting when he's needed to, and it's illustrated even more in chapter 4 more than anywhere else that his killer instincts thrives when it's in situations like this. After dealing with the ambush, they are forced to walk through the streets, and we learn a little bit more about Joel and his past and where he came from and what actually happened in those 20 years since the start of the infection. Joel kinda opens up to Ellie here as she inquires how he knew that there was a trap being sprung or being set for people to come by. Joel of course makes it very clear that he knew the intentions of the bandits because he too has been on that side. He was once one of them. He was a bandit, someone who had to live of hurting other people, who had to roll with a gang to get by. Joel says it quite clearly that he has been on the other side and he's not going back. Further pushing of Joel's inner demons and the shame he holds for his past, but also shows how much wrong Joel really has done in this world and that he continues to prove he isn't a nice man and probably not the best father figure. I think this chapter being a short, sweet one adds a lot to Joel and Ellie. It brings them two together, it allows Ellie to understand a little more about Joel and who he was and what he did in the past. With Ellie's questions continued to be answered as well by Joel. For example, they come across cars where they find skeletons in them, proving that they were killed before they were even infected, and Joel makes it very clear back then they didn't know what to believe or who to kill, so most people, if they were in the way, they possibly got killed by the government just to clear them out. It's a chapter that teaches the player and Ellie that in this world you have to do whatever you can do to survive. There are a few key locations that pop up in this one chapter. You go through a library, of course, where you get introduced to Ellie's incredible pun book, where you have to take out a bunch of goons. You find a small coffee shop where Joel confesses his love for coffee and that Ellie was clearly missing out on what coffee was like back in the day. But the biggest one and the biggest set piece of the chapter is, of course, the main hotel, which is now being used as a hideout for the bandits. Sneaking their way through the hotel, Joel is taking out the bandits one by one, but unfortunately they are quickly split up when Joel takes a fall down an elevator shaft and lands in the basement. Which is now entirely crawling with infected. Easily scariest moment in the game, this legendary. Ellie now alone and scared, Joel makes his way through the basement, taking out any infected in his way, returning power to the doors and getting back up to Ellie, but first he has to make his way through, of course, more bandits. Joel is unfortunately then caught off guard and a bandit begins to drown him, nearly killing Joel until suddenly he is shot and killed. Joel comes up for air and sees that it is Ellie finally holding a gun and took a man's life.
I shot the hell out of that guy, huh?
Ellie plays it off jokingly but quickly takes a seat as she realises she's all of a sudden become nauseated from the experience, and Joel doesn't do anything other than telling her that it was a mistake for her to look for him and to use a gun. He doesn't even give her a thank you, and Ellie takes this extremely personally, and Joel clearly doesn't know what to do with these emotions either. You can tell there is then a tension between these two, Joel trying to communicate with Ellie on what to do, but Ellie not communicating back or just giving him short quick answers, sarcastically, but also in a way that Joel needs to learn a lesson here and learn how he's going to treat Ellie going onwards. Joel can sense this tension and he finally realises an opportunity where he can break it and finally give Ellie the respect she is looking for. When having to exit the hotel, they can see their path is completely blocked off by a group of bandits. Joel knows here he won't be able to take them out alone, or at least he could, but with a great struggle. So he asks Ellie if she could watch over him, hands her a rifle, hands her that responsibility, and allows her to keep cover fire while he deals with them as well. He then looks at her and says it was either me or him, and she takes that as his way of saying thank you.
You're welcome.
Finally working together as a team, Joel and Ellie burn people alive, shoot people through the head, crack open skulls, remove teeth, and break plenty of noses. Lovely father figure. After dinner with the bandits, Joel understands that Ellie does need her own gun. He needs to accept that she needs to grow up. She is a very different person from Sarah, and the world that she lives in is also very different as well. He hands her her own pistol and realizes how strong they are together as a team. That's the message of this chapter. Joel and Ellie, and Joel accepting that Ellie has grown up in a totally different world than he could ever have imagined. Joel realizing and exploring his past to realize that Ellie is in a position where her innocence and independency are so wildly different from the world he once knew that he knows he can't do things alone and he can't keep holding her back in risk of putting himself in danger and of course Ellie. Breaking down those stubborn fatherly walls, he allows her to be the person she wants to be in this world and allows her to help Joel in the best of her abilities because they're both on this adventure as well, and if he can't raise her to look after herself and survive in this world, then who can? Joel learns that he can't just be the same father figure he used to be, but instead evolve with the times, evolve with the apocalypse. The chapter continues a little further and we learn that there is fighting between the bandits and the survivors, and that maybe they were a clan once who quickly fell apart when the food started disappearing because, of course, Fedra forces, leading to gangs being made and brought together, murdering the innocents for food, and of course and killing all of Fedra who held out on the food and the resources that the survivors needed in Pittsburgh. allowing for this community that turned into a gang to take the city over by storm and taking anyone out who comes in their path, which unfortunately is of course Joel and Ellie. Further making their way through the city, they are then intercepted by the gang, who now have an APC which once belonged to Fedra, hunting down anyone who went against them and was able to escape their traps. While taking out the gang and hiding from this APC, Joel and Ellie are quickly caught off guard though, Joel being forced into conflict with another person who's just trying to protect his brother, and this is where we get introduced to Sam and Henry. Sam and Henry are two brothers, just like Ellie and Joel, trying to make it through Pittsburgh. And we see in this chapter how important the relationship is between these two brothers. Henry has taken on this father figure role and wanting to be a strong influence on his little brother Sam. Henry for a moment believes that Ellie maybe is Joel's daughter, but of course is quickly corrected, but respects the promise that Joel has made to look after her, and clearly there's a promise that Henry possibly made too, to look after Sam. Ellie very quickly takes a liking to Sam as a friend. They're similar in age and even similar in personalities. But unlike Ellie, there's a childishness that Sam still holds onto that Ellie maybe longs for and Sam desperately tries to cling onto. And the first time we see this is when we're trying to sneak through a toy shop. Sam finds a robot toy that he thinks is pretty cool, but is quickly shot down then by his older brother Henry, who tells him to only hold on to the important things and not to get distracted. This of course is a reverse mirror to what we see in Joel. Joel of course is a survivalist and would teach Ellie just important lessons, but Joel also wants to hold on to Ellie's innocence and childish nature, as we saw in the last chapter. But Henry is eager to make Sam grow up fast and learn what it means to be responsible. A nice touch here in the toy shop is when you aren't looking, the player can turn the camera back and you can see Ellie picking up that toy and placing it in her bag, but we'll get back to that later on. Joel and Henry have a lot in common and their pairing reflects each other in a lot of ways, and despite Joel not exactly trusting Henry, he sees a lot of himself in him having to look after his brother and having to do it all alone, that there's a clear connection that these two could work as a team. Ellie and Sam both being the main focus and motivation for these men to continue surviving and to continue moving forward, and Joel respects that. And on top of that as well, Joel learns that Henry is also looking for the Fireflies, and so it only makes sense for these four to work as a team and get through Pittsburgh alive. Taking a moment to rest till nightfall drops, we overhear Henry talking to Sam, readying him for what the plan is to try and sneak past the remaining bandits. He's talking to Sam, almost belittling him with his attitude, treating him like a child, and clearly Sam really isn't impressed by it, but he nods along anyway. With the cover of night, Joel and Henry work as a team and take out the remaining bandits that are looking over a checkpoint that leads to the bridge, and with the tools provided and the power of stealth, the group is luckily able to take down the threat and escape the city, going over the walls. But there is one more challenge afoot. There's a ladder that they each need to climb on top of a truck, Joel lifting Henry and Sam up first, hoping they would help them out, but the bandits are fast on their tail and that ACP we saw from earlier suddenly comes back. But instead of quickly helping Joel and Ellie to get up to safety, Henry instead leaves them behind and leaves them to the ACP, on which Joel has to react quickly and make sure him and Ellie can get out there fast, trying to run away from this charging truck that's currently firing at them on this bridge. Cornered with nowhere to go, the only solution left is to jump in the river. But of course Ellie couldn't swim, on which we learned earlier on. Joel is fully aware of her inability to swim, desperately trying to grab hold of her as the rapids take them downstream, and just as he grabs her floating body in the stream, they are hit and taken out by oncoming rocks in the river. Waking up on a beach now with Ellie, Sam and Henry all back, Henry laughs like they didn't just experience that and he didn't just leave Joel and Ellie behind. Joel, quickly catching his breath back, is of course pissed at Henry and tackles him, taking his gun away, pushing him to the ground and holding a gun to Henry. Henry of course then explains that he had to leave or Sam would be at risk of being shot and killed. This of course speaks to Joel. Joel would do the same thing for Sarah, and he now would have done the same thing for Ellie. Joel understands this as a father, as a protector, and begrudgingly of course lowers the gun and gives it back to Henry, but there is still little trust between these two. In the next section, Joel and Ellie are in good spirits, luckily, with their relationship, knowing that they have each other's back, especially as Ellie could have easily run off with Sam and Henry, but of course Ellie wants to stick by Joel and make sure he stays alive as well. A bit of dialogue I love here is that Joel admits to Ellie that he would have easily killed Henry there and then just for endangering her life, But this is a changed man. This isn't the man who would have pulled the trigger earlier on or broken someone's arm. Instead, he stopped pulling that trigger and he spared Henry's life, giving him a chance to talk. There's clearly change going on with this character. Walking their way down this beach, they're trying to get to a radio tower so they can at least try and make contact with the Fireflies. But the group unfortunately are forced to go through a sewer system which leads directly to where the radio tower should be. But they are completely unaware that they're walking into a sewer society of survivors who became infected and now lurk within this fungi infested sewer. During their search through this sewer, Joel accidentally sets off a trap, splitting the group in half. But with a twist, this time Joel is stuck with Sam and Henry has to look after Ellie. Both elders threateningly making promises to each other to look after each other's younger companion. Sam and Joel are forced to make their way through a stalker and clicker lair until they are reunited with Henry and Ellie again. But unfortunately there are so many hordes of infected that there is no time for a reunion talk and they have to keep running, trapping themselves into a small room. This room appears to be blocked off from the other side, meaning someone in the past had blocked this door and escaped this lair before. And what seems to be no chance of breaking down the gate, Sam finds there's a little vent that he's actually able to crawl through, and notably Henry is very quickly angered by this moment, angered by Sam making his own choices which could put him in danger but instead end up saving their lives. The group are then further funneled into a dead end which is now once again blocked off but from the outside of the sewer entrance. But luckily Ellie and Sam are small enough to fit through a small window which Henry hoists them both through, allowing them to get on the other side and move whatever was blocking the door, while Joel and Henry of course have to take down a horde of infected in the only way they know how, extremely violently. With the horde quickly thinned out and the object that was blocking the door now removed, the group quickly run outside, slamming the door behind them and blocking it again, hopefully if not for somebody else to walk through in the future, with a sign warning people not to enter, which would have been nice to know when using the other entrance.
Thanks for the warning on the other side, guys.
Back outside with no infected around, the group now has to make their way through a residential area which is pretty quiet. This whole sequence, once again like earlier on in the car, acts as a way for the game to calm down, to de-stress and allow the player to get to know the characters and maybe learn a little more about their world. There's moments where they reflect on what just happened in the sewers and they even laugh about it, some even gloating on how they killed the infected. And there are many cute and fun little situational conversations that can come up, from playing darts and making conversations about Joel being grumpy all the time, the in hindsight weird idea about ice cream trucks playing music to lure children to know they can have ice cream, and of course dogs being free in the wild when we used to once own them in houses, but of course now they're not to be trusted because they may just be wild animals. This moment is calming, it's sweet, it's memorable, and it's these key little moments that really makes The Last of Us stand out back when it did, because the game takes time and allows the player to get to know the group's relationship and even allow them to grow within these small moments. But unfortunately, all this bonding is quickly disturbed. Despite everything seeming like it was in the clear, the bandits still from Pittsburgh are still out to try and chase down Joel and Henry. Quickly taking cover behind a car, Joel instructs Henry to take the kids and lead them to safety, while he, the one-man army, takes out the bandits and makes his way to the sniper, hopefully drawing its attention. Making his way to the sniper, Joel's expertise in combat seems to show again, ambushing and taking down squads of men while Henry draws the fire of the sniper. Joel manages to sneak past the remaining few bandits and sneaks in the back of the house where the sniper seems to be camping in the attic. Making his way upstairs, he is then quickly ambushed by the sniper, but of course he is no match for Joel's brutality, and Joel now has this sniper in his hands, where he's luckily able to take out some of the remaining bandits, but of course that ACP returns again, chasing down Sam, Henry and Ellie, but Joel finds the right timing and luckily shoots a Molotov out one of the bandits' hands who is sitting in the ACP, who wasn't of course aware Joel being on the sniper, and sets it ablaze, taking out the ACP and of course killing off the bandits. All again seems quiet, but unfortunately all this ruckus and the explosion has of course alerted the infected nearby, taking both Sam and Henry to the ground, but luckily Joel and Ellie were able to quickly shoot the infected before any damage was done, with hordes of the infected now running down the road towards the house on which Joel is now set up in. The group assess the situation and understand they're about to be surrounded by infected, so they simply take the back door and get the hell out of this residential hellhole. Cut into an abandoned motel, hot meal brewing, and Joel and Henry laughing, talking about the past, talking about past adventures, and even what they missed. A genuine conversation between two grown men, which Joel seems to have been missing for a very long time. Ellie finds the opportunity to let them have their fun, so of course she goes to hang out with Sam to see how he is doing. Sam appears to be checking stock, but there is something off about his positive attitude. This time it's different. First off, Sam, before even anything, asks Ellie if she's just been asked to come in here by Henry to make sure he isn't fucking up again. She quickly dismisses this to hopefully bring back his comfort, but Sam asks Ellie something very odd. He asks her what is she actually scared of. She talks about being alone in the world and having no one by her. Sam of course shares his feelings on fear, and he mentions how he's worried that the infected are still human. They have no control over themselves. They're just stuck behind a decaying, rotting shell. This is a very mature moment for Ellie, and I appreciate that they allow these two younger characters to have a very adult conversation, allowing them to reflect on their world and their own upbringing and what they're used to without those who came from before getting involved. Breaking the tension of the situation, Ellie is quickly reminded of the robot toy from earlier we saw her pick up in the toy shop, and of course she hands it over to Sam as a little gift and a little thank you, hoping to lift his spirits, but he is still oddly silent and reflective upon looking at this. Ellie of course leaves him to his own devices to go to bed, and Sam just sits there angrily throwing the toy to the ground, looking disappointed. He pulls up his trouser leg and it's revealed to us that he had been bitten amongst all of this mess. Day breaks and spirits are high. A breakfast is being cooked. Henry is allowing Sam to sleep in for once, but Ellie is of course eager to get the show on the road and wants to go wake up Sam to have some breakfast before heading out. She opens the door and we see an infected Sam who already rushes at Ellie, tackling her to the ground. Joel scurrying in a panic, but a panicked Henry then shoots at Joel, believing that it's still his brother inside there, but he has no choice but instead to make the right one, killing his own brother, shooting him to save Ellie. Unconsolable, Henry is confused, broken, upset, blaming Joel for everything with hollow words that mean nothing, feeling like he's broken a promise that he made to someone long ago. Joel trying to talk to Henry to calm him down, but he pulls the trigger on himself, and the four quickly become two again. The lessons of responsibility are ever present in that chapter, from the responsibility of an older sibling looking after the younger, the responsibility that Henry loads onto a younger Sam, the responsibility of two strangers in the same situation looking out for each other, and of course the responsibility of growing up. Sam and Henry are tied together forever, a brotherhood in family, in blood, growing up too fast in a world which is out to kill you. Prior to the chapter that we see before with Joel accepting Ellie's role in this new changing world, in their relationship and how they overcome that, we see the opposite mirror reflection in this chapter, and that burden of responsibility that is heavy on Henry but extremely heavy on a fleeting Sam by the end. Ellie for Sam is able to get him to laugh, enjoy the small things in life, hold on to those moments that make you feel like a kid, the playfulness that needs to return in the world. Hence why there's that moment where you walk around that residential area just playing darts and talking about the world before, bringing back that sense of innocence and childishness that Henry is so desperate to suck out of Sam, while Joel is happy enough to allow Ellie to feel younger than she is. There is a theme of responsibility that comes from this whole new world Joel, Ellie, Sam and Henry are all learning to live in, not just about survival, but the purposes in what we find worth living for. And at the end of it all, when Sam was put down by Henry, he felt like he failed his ultimate responsibility as a brother, and in light of all that in that moment, he felt like he lost his purpose. And I suppose while we're on the subject of brotherhood,
Jackson County. Means we're close to Jackson City, right?
Shouldn't be more than a few miles.
You ready to see dear old brother?
Getting closer to Jackson, Wyoming, where Tommy, Joel's brother, now lives, Joel and Ellie reflect a little bit on the past with Tommy and Joel. As assessed early on, Tommy knows Marlene and was once a big member of the Fireflies. Tommy and Joel's views on the world of course is very different, and that put a fork in the road for their relationship. Tommy, clearly back then a lot younger and willing to fight for change, while Joel was still lost and angry with what happened to Sarah and how the world was changing so fast. It's explained to us that the last thing Tommy said to Joel is that he would never want to see his face again, so it's truly hard to say where their relationship stands now. Making your way up the mountain pass and crossing over a dam after a really cool and exciting high five from Ellie, they come across a campsite where they find a grave, and this sparks a dialogue between Ellie and Joel talking about what happened with Sam and Henry. She mentions how she's annoyed that she didn't leave the toy robot on the grave and is still holding onto it and doesn't know what to do with it. She is then cut off by Joel, and I think this conversation can lean either two ways, either you agree or either you don't agree with him. Joel makes it clear that things happen in this world, especially in this post-apocalyptic world, so there's no point talking about what happened. Ellie of course is confused, but she does agree with Joel's statement. It's hard to say whether or not he's in the right here, because people should talk about their feelings, especially with people like Joel who lock themselves up, but at the same time he's just looking out for her, making sure she doesn't hold on to the past very much like he did, but it doesn't mean she's not holding on to it mentally rather than sentimentally. But we can tell as an audience that that was an event that's going to shape Ellie's character for the future. And on the other hand of this conversation, it allows Joel to open up with Ellie, because this statement obviously goes towards Tess, Bill, and even Sarah. It allows Joel to express a feeling that Ellie's been trying to allow him to express for a long time, and he teaches her a lesson just by opening up like he does in this moment. Making their way up the dam, they are caught by surprise and held at gunpoint, but not this time by bandits, but clearly other people just willing to survive, who've made base at least with inside the dam. Just as things seem intense, a man shouts that they're clearly okay to pass. Of course the survivors are questioning how this person would know this, and Tommy appears saying that it's his brother, spurring Joel and Tommy to get together and share in a brotherly caring hug as they greet each other with love and respect. In this short moment of catch up, Joel of course introduces Ellie, and Tommy introduces Maria, Tommy's new wife, who is now Joel's sister-in-law. It's a sweet, humbling reunion between the two brothers, as Tommy is clearly getting his things in order, as he is now running with a crew who are trying to boot up the dam so they can have enough electricity to run back to Jackson. And despite things feeling pretty operational, there are plenty of things that still need to be worked on within the dam, and Joel is of course willing to lend a helping hand as he gets to update his brother with the whole Ellie situation. While walking around and getting to know the crew members of the dam, Tommy tells Joel that they went back to the old town in Texas where everything all began, and collected a picture of Joel and Sarah just in case they were ever to meet again, but Joel of course is reluctant to hold on to these memories and doesn't want to accept this from Tommy. It seems like Tommy and Joel at this point have lived two very different lives, and Tommy genuinely has more of a positive outlook on life, and whatever happened between those 2 years of these two brothers and Tommy being part of the Fireflies, it's clearly all behind him now. Joel and Tommy have a second to have a private chat in a room. Joel explains to Tommy the situation of Ellie being immune to the infection, and of course Tommy doesn't believe him at first, but Joel makes it very clear that it is the truth. And the reason he came to Tommy is because he knew Tommy knew good people and knew the Fireflies, hoping that Tommy could take Ellie off his hands, giving her over to the Firefly, while Joel just simply takes some gear, leaves the dam, leaves Ellie, and goes back to the way life was before. Tommy of course doesn't accept this. He makes it very clear that a lot has changed in his life. The people who Joel thinks he can just lug a girl on has also got family. Tommy has a responsibility to those with families. Tommy himself has a family. Joel just can't come into his life, expect to be the older brother, stamp all over him, take some of his stuff and go. Tommy makes it clear that he's in charge here, and Joel needs to take the responsibility for looking after the girl. This argument is quickly interrupted by bandits, so of course nothing is settled. It's only after this attack that Tommy realizes how important Ellie is to Joel. Joel doesn't want to get rid of her for the sake of not having her on his back, but instead just for her own safety. He clearly realizes how important this girl is to Joel, and obviously how important she is to the world at the current moment. Maria of course is hesitant and doesn't want Tommy going out on some suicide journey to deliver a girl for someone who she doesn't know, but Tommy has the history with Joel and knows what he needs to do to make sure his brother is okay okay to make sure Ellie is okay. He agrees that he will take some of his crew and drop Ellie off to the Fireflies and to make sure that she is protected. But before anything is settled once again, Ellie this time makes a break for it, steals one of the horses after overhearing the plan for Joel to leave her with these strangers. Joel and Tommy then head out, grab horses and follow the trail back to Ellie. There is also an encounter with bandits in this situation, but it's completely not needed in this chapter. Even replaying it, I was like, why are these guys here? It's obviously just for people who are getting bored of the story, but this chapter's a story chapter. It should remain that way. This encounter doesn't happen. They follow the horse tracks all the way back to an old ranch. Aware of the situation, Tommy of course waits outside where Joel and Ellie have a private conversation. This is one of the most, if not the most iconic and most powerful scene of the game, maybe coming close to the intro with Sarah. Joel finds Ellie sitting reading a diary alone, talking about is this all the world had to worry about, what fashion and who's kissing who, and Joel gets angry and blames her for running away, putting herself in danger and not understanding how important she is to humanity. But Ellie rebukes in disappointment with Joel even after everything that they went through. Joel was so willing to get rid of her just so he can go back to his old life. Like none of the past few months ever mattered to him. He keeps trying to hide his true emotions and feelings towards Ellie and her safety by talking about how many close calls they came to and how much safer she's going to be with Tommy's crew. But Ellie knows deep down that that isn't the point. It's not just about her safety, but it's about reliving the past with Sarah, and what if he lost her again, just like he lost Sarah. She brings this up and he shuts her down so fast because she hits the nail right on the head. But instead of pausing and avoiding the situation, she brings up the fact that she was born in this world. Everyone she knows and loves has left her, has died, and she has lost just as much as Joel has, so what excuse does he have if she's able to push on as well? Everyone except for Joel, the one person who has been a true father figure to her through these past few months. Of course, he builds a wall again and says one of the most heartbreaking lines you could ever say to someone like Ellie.
Right. You're not my daughter. And I sure as hell ain't your dad.
They are then quickly interrupted by again more bandits for the people who don't like story. I don't like this pacing here, bandits don't need to be here, but it allows for all three characters to be on their own horses and definitely allows for Joel and Ellie to be separated and giving Joel that time that he needs to think while they're riding back to Jackson, which should hopefully now have power from the dam. Overlooking the town, and after that ride back, Joel has had time to think about what's happening. He asks Tommy where's this Firefly outpost and learns that it's in a university not far from there. Joel then takes the responsibility and asks Ellie to return the horse and jump up on the horse with Joel, allowing him to make up for his mistakes and allowing him to see it through with Ellie, knowing that he can protect her just like he should. Tommy tries to stop Joel to let him go back and at least talk about the plan, but Joel says he's too stubborn, he knows what he's like and that he loves his brother and wants him to look after his wife. Tommy then offers a place for both Joel and Ellie in Jackson. Joel gives him a slight nod, reassures and asks Ellie if she's okay. Joel says adios and they were on their way. And the lesson of family is then crystal clear. The reflection of Tommy and Joel's past fuels many choices that Joel makes here, many that are wrong and stubbornly even misguided. And despite claiming that he wants the gear and move on his own, he knows it's not in his heart to leave Ellie behind, and Ellie knows that as well. Tommy and Joel squabble over past arguments and mistakes, but that doesn't matter to these two new older men. Tommy is a leader, he's married, and Joel has found a new purpose and love in his life. Both of these brothers aren't the same men they used to be. They respect and love each other no matter what the difference is, no matter the lies, or no matter what the past threw at them. They've come a long way and they've found their chosen family, and that family has found them. And this goes also with Joel and Ellie. Despite the history not being as long-winded as Tommy, the bond is just as important to Joel, if not more so. Tommy and Joel are blood brothers, but Tommy's love, care and responsibility for his new family is way more important than whatever Joel was offering him, even if that was to save humanity. Joel realizes that Ellie is family now and they have to stick together no matter the distances they go or what they may face. That's what family means to Joel. He has to see this through to the end. He has to make amends for what he felt like he put Tommy through and of course what he put Ellie just through. Even if that means coming to terms with his stubborn emotions and once again chipping away at that armor of grief he so heavily bears. Despite being clearly the shortest chapter in the game, I think this one is just as important as the rest. I think this following chapter is maybe the most hopeful we see out of these two main protagonists, opening with them having a friendly conversation over the rules of American football and Ellie not truly understanding those rules. I'm alive and I still don't understand those rules. And Joel wanting to teach her certain things in the future that she never got to try because of the state of the world she grew up in. There's a general sense of calm and ease in the air with gentle guitar strings playing in the back, a soundtrack to a fun, caring conversation between Joel and Ellie riding on the back of the now named horse, Callus. Ellie brings up the prospects of her own future and who she wanted to be or wants to be in the future. In her case, it's an astronaut, escaping this planet, leaving the stresses of this world behind and seeing what is out there amongst the stars. And when asking Joel what he wanted to be, he reveals that he actually wanted to be a singer and nearly is forced to show his talents in front of Ellie until they are distracted what appears to be monkeys running around the university, clearly broken loose from some sort of lab. Quickly, like most things in The Last of Us, things start going wrong and Joel and Ellie need to separate once again while Joel tries to get the power back running in the university so they can make their way through and finally find out where these Firefly scientists are hiding. While separated from Ellie, he comes across what appears to be a hive full of clickers and of course a bloater enemy type again. This little sequence alone falls back into that theme of future that this chapter is about. Joel becomes face to face with the futures that never were, with students having to survive alone within these dorms who are now of course infected. It doesn't do much for the narrative, but as just a little story arc moment for Joel to experience, I actually think this is a standout segment in the whole game. After escaping the infected hive, Joel and Ellie make it deeper into the university, and that hopefulness that this chapter began with is now well and truly gone. A frustrated Ellie begins shouting, looking for any fireflies, but of course there is no answers, and Joel is angry but also calm, and that silent yet prepared demeanor returns again on high alert. And after a long search of the labs, there apparently seems to be no one else around other than monkeys who are left to literally pick up the pieces and probably eat them, because monkeys. On listening to the audio logs, Joel and Ellie learns that the Firefly scientist had to move to a totally different lab and had gone to a hospital in Salt Lake City. And that's where of course Joel and Ellie are pointed to and will be heading next. But before we get any answers, there's unexpected human movement and then the shooting begins again.
Fireflies?
Get down!
Ambushed by these scavengers, Joel and Ellie fight their way through the labs in hopes to get into Salt Lake City. This combat encounter goes exactly as well as you can imagine for the ambushers, and that's not very. Joel and Ellie seem to make their way through until Joel is unexpectedly ambushed, thrusted over a ledge and falls right onto a piece of barb which pierces right through his body. Unable to move and bleeding out, Ellie is now forced to take charge of this situation, try and stand him up and pull him through and get him out of this university, but of course they are still being attacked by these ambushers. Now weak and bleeding out, Joel stumbles through the university, and the prospects of the future that he mentioned with Ellie are so quickly fading away from his life. Ellie, completely terrified but still holds her own against the ambushers, leading the flank and begging Joel to keep up and keep moving. Though he is weak, he is also still very stubborn, refusing to allow Ellie to carry him as he fears he may slow her down or that he may not even need it. Despite the tensions being at an all-time high and the aggravations against Joel are showing, Ellie still has time to make a joke and mention the fact that he needs to make it through because she needs to listen to Joel's singing voice for her in the future. And that's a hopeful future they need to hold on to. They just need to be able to make it through to allow him to sing one last song. And with a few close calls, one too many, they finally make it out of the university, Ellie lifting an already weak Joel onto Callus as they make it out of there on horseback. Despite things seeming okay, Joel of course slowly loses consciousness and falls to the floor. An upset Ellie, unaware whether he's still alive or not, is left now there, scared and alone again. This isn't the first time she's seen this happen to someone she loves. Okay, I'm back. I don't know if you noticed after that last chapter, but I was ill as shit. But I'm okay. I'm back. Oh, let's get to it. Taking place weeks before the events of the main story, Ellie lies in bed and is jokingly and shockingly awoken by her best friend, Riley, pretending to then be infected, a nice little bit of foreshadowing. It turns out they haven't actually seen each other in a while, Riley leaving and skipping town, and to Ellie's disappointment and disbelief, Riley joining the Fireflies. Ellie at this point is still in school being trained by Fedra to become a part of their society and maybe even their force. And this gives us a bit more of an understanding of how Ellie at her age understands how to protect herself and to also navigate this world, or at least what she's been shown in school. Riley sneaks into Ellie's room with the idea for her to join her late at night so she can show her a cool little surprise. Ellie, still in disbelief, begrudgingly follows along with Riley's lead, but she isn't too happy about it. During this DLC, it cuts backwards and forwards between the present and the past, with Ellie getting medicine to make sure Joel survives that wound and to make it through the winter. This all takes place within a shopping mall where we see Ellie learning how to survive on her own this time. But for me personally in the story, this doesn't do much other than show you where she gets medicine from and also how she becomes a sole survivor. But mostly I just want to overlook the important part of this DLC, which is of course the past with her and Riley. This is where the main DLC focuses its attention with the relationship between these two girls. Ellie clearly looks up to Riley. She sees her as an older and more mature version of herself possibly. Ellie often in self-doubt with her childish nature and sometimes playful in her mannerisms, and also she's proven to still be a little shit in school, constantly getting in trouble. But Riley isn't as mature as Ellie makes her out to seem, but she's able to bring out a rebellious side to Ellie that we're actually used to seeing in the main game, but at this point, Ellie hasn't got the confidence to embrace what that is. From drinking alcohol to smashing windows with bricks and playing in costume shops with each other to doing things that normal girls once did in the past before the world fell apart. Riley in some cases brings out the best parts of Ellie that she never even knew existed. For a moment, these two totally forget about the state of the world that they're living in, mocking each other's ideas, laughing loudly, screaming and playing out, forgetting that there's risk of infected and even worse. Ellie often finds moments to ask Riley about what she's doing with the Firefly, what her plans are in the future, and Riley is very quickly to shoot down these questions and just focus on these good times. There's clearly a tension between these two despite them showing they care for each other greatly, but it's a very slow process to break that tension down. Ellie isn't quite ready to think about the future. She's kind of taking it day by day. That childish innocence that she has is still pretty much retained within her, while Riley is clearly more of an independent type, thinking about her future, thinking about her ambitions, and that's what draws her to Marlene and the Fireflies. Getting the power back on, the mall lights up like Christmas, warm hues and the comfort of technology of days of the past, allowing Riley and Ellie to feel normal for once. Riley here enables Ellie's dreams to literally come true, allowing them to experience a merry-go-round, giving her her most iconic weapon, the pun book, using a photo machine and taking fun photos, which doesn't work, but at least it was worth a try. And of course, Ellie's main dream, being able to play video games in the arcade, which unfortunately doesn't work. But Riley doesn't give up that quickly and allows Ellie's imagination to come alive, explaining what's happening in the video game, allowing Ellie to live it out for a moment, to be lost in the world of a game she so dearly holds close to her heart. Something she actually brings up back in chapter 3 when you're in Bill's town. Riley jumps through incredible hoops just to give Ellie the night of her life, but there is something very much off about this whole situation. We learn after a water fight that Riley is leaving and being disbanded from the Fireflies in Boston and moving to a new city. Riley has gotten so mixed up in the Fireflies and so deep in their activities, she's now paying for the repercussions of wanting to be an adult too quickly. Instead of being able to promise her best friend that she's going to stay, she has to leave Ellie Ellie behind. She has to say goodbye. She has no other choice. At this point, she's a wanted criminal in Boston, and there's no way she can go back to the life that she knew. But despite this news bomb, Ellie is still able to provide support for Riley, knowing that Riley always wanted to get out of the city and it's what's best for her and someone with her ambitions, and they're guaranteed to see each other again in the future. There's obviously more going on behind the scenes with Ellie here, as she's desperately trying to hide her true feelings and just trying to support Riley, who she loves very much. To celebrate, Riley is able to get music playing in the store, and both of the girls begin to start dancing, just having fun, letting go, allowing that tension that was once there to just finally leave, allowing them to be free. Ellie doesn't know what to do with all these emotions. Ellie doesn't know how to say goodbye to Riley, and she kisses her. Whether it's out of love, whether it's out of a jerk reaction, it's hard to say, but Riley knows that she can't say goodbye to Ellie because she loves her just as much, whether that's as a friend or even more so. Riley makes it clear that she doesn't want to leave with the Fireflies if that means leaving Ellie behind, and they're just going to have to work it out together. But unfortunately, the whole situation is then interrupted by the infected being drawn by the music, and all of a sudden reality starts crashing down on them. Riley and Ellie are forced to run through the mall, outrunning infected, closing doors behind them until they make it to the rooftop where there is no way out. Both of them are able to take down the infected, but first were overwhelmed and thrown to the ground. And just as they both thought they made it out alive to see another day, it's revealed they were both bitten during the scruffle. Here they don't know what to do, they don't know what's next. Do they just put themselves out of their misery with the gun, or do they just spend the last remaining hours they have with each other to get all poetic and shit and lose their minds together? Unfortunately, that never happened for Ellie. Ellie saw Riley become infected and she's still waiting her turn. This whole DLC and chapter is beautiful. I think it's definitely one of the highlights of the game, despite it being a DLC at the time. Now, of course, it's always included with every copy of the game, but the lesson and the narrative shown here with Ellie's relationships and the way that she's able to love people, and we learn how she loves people, but we also learn a lot of why she has trouble saying goodbye and letting people go, and making that scene with Joel so much more impactful when it comes around, with you understanding what happened between her and Riley. So when there's this brilliant juxtapose that takes place in the present day, you get an understanding of why Ellie does all she can do to make sure Joel survives, because she knows she can't take losing another person she loves so dear. And as she said to Sam, she's terrified of the realities of being alone one day. The winter is cold, and this chapter begins with Ellie alone. Ellie at this point being alone has been pretty experienced in hunting, killing rabbits, and now chasing down deer to have meat to make it through the winter. Joel isn't around to be seen, and it's hard to determine what has happened in these last few weeks. Ellie has clearly gone through a lot and has clearly learned a lot, and is now able to hunt on her own, tracking down this deer she is so desperate to find, and finding its corpse to realise it wasn't killed by her hand. She suspects right away something is wrong, and that's when we get introduced to this chapter's villain, David, a soft-spoken man with intentions to show a peaceful resolve, mentioning the fact they were hunting just like Ellie to look after their own community filled with women and children. But at this point, Ellie doesn't know whether to call his bluff or to make her own, but she's able to use this chance to persuade David and his right-hand man to go get some medicine that she needs to look after Joel, but of course keeping that bit a secret. David here is pretty much happy to oblige, allowing his guy to run back to the town while him and Ellie remain with the deer. But Ellie of course is still on the cautious side and asks David to give over his rifle, which once again he is more than willing to do. And this also allows themselves to move the deer into a hut and into a safer, warmer spot where they build a fire. David asks many questions about Ellie, and Ellie is also still very suspicious about his intentions, but is quick to lower her guard until they are ambushed by more infected who heard the gunshots that killed the deer. Here David stands up and we learn that he is still actually holding a gun and was able to betray Ellie at any time, but he didn't, and for Ellie this kind of learns that he can be trusted and maybe he's a kind man as well, actually wanting to survive for his people. Fighting together and making a pretty good team, this is where the player and David learns just how good Ellie is with a gun, showing how far she's come from being that girl we knew back in chapter 4. She is now pretty much very well equipped, with her iconic knife being able to now handle a rifle, a pistol and a bow and arrow with near to no issues. And these two together are able to fend off this horde, and the tension that was there before has now been dropped, as there is clearly a trust between them. David then continues this narrative about this community he has and all his friends who he once sent out on a mission. They were sent to some university and they were all killed and slaughtered by a crazy man, and the funny thing is, this man was seen with a little girl. And this is when Ellie catches on. Maybe he wasn't hunting the deer, but he was out there looking for her and Joel for revenge. Nearly ambushed though, David shows his power by having his right hand sneak up behind Ellie and still hand over the medicine to help her. Ellie, thinking she's in the clear for some reason, naive to this situation, she grabs the medicine and gets out of there, not expecting anything to come off it, but this is just the start of this nightmare. We see that Ellie has made a safe house where she's hiding Joel in the basement to recover. Joel here is still well medicated, as we learned from the DLC she was able to grab supplies, but he is feverish and struggling throughout the winter, but all she can do is keep medicating him, sitting with him and hope that they see it both through till the morning. Waking to the sunlight, Ellie hears distant voices near the safe house and realizes that clearly this is David's community and they had tracked her and Callus the horse. Trying to sneak out on the back of Callus, Ellie is then attacked and put on the run. Callus is shot and killed and falls off a cliff, leaving Ellie alone, now on her feet, needing to run but putting those newly acquired skills to good use and trying to take out as many of David's guys as she can and drawing them away from Joel's position. Just as she thinks she has them on the run and is able to get away from them, we hear that soft, creepy fucking voice of David again as he sneaks behind Ellie, strangles her and makes her black out. Waking up in a cell, Ellie finds a butcher not cutting apart the deer, but instead human. David's community was real and they're cannibals. And speaking of that creepy fuck, he enters the room and this is when he gives one of the most disturbing conversations we hear throughout the entire game. He offers her food at first, promises that it is the deer. He's maybe a cannibal, but he understands that not everyone will go to those lengths, but is eager to find out Ellie's name and repeatedly keeps asking for it. David's odd and creepy demeanor here is then only backed up by one of the most disgusting things I think I've ever heard in a video game. He informs her that he wants to keep her alive, he likes her spirit, he thinks that she will be great for the community and that she's maybe going to be great for him. Ellie catches on pretty quickly. She freaks out, grabs hold of David's hand and then breaks his finger, and then delivering my favorite line in the entire game.
Ellie.
What?
Tell him that Ellie is the little girl that broke your fucking finger!
David, now more hateful and spiteful than ever, is feeling a lot less touchy-feeling with Ellie before and promises that he will then cut her into tiny pieces. Joel awakes, still weak and hurt, but he understands and knows something is wrong and he has to protect Ellie. He wakes up searching the house, searching the town, and realizes David's community too are still there. Still weak but willing to put up a fight, Joel knows exactly what he needs to do to these guys, able to get the drop on them and taking them out. They thought they were there to deal with an old man who killed some of their men, but they wasn't prepared for what kind of man Joel really is. What I like here is we see that Joel energy from the early game chapter 2. He's angry, he's cold-hearted, he's a man willing to kill if you touch or even take what is most important to him, and at this point you took his family and now you're going to pay for it. In this incredibly tense interrogation scene, we see just how little Joel really cares about these people's lives, interrogating one man, sticking a knife behind his kneecap, willing to pop it off, listening to his screams but promising him he will let him go if he knows where David took Ellie, putting a bloody knife in the man's mouth and asking him to make a mark on the map. Joel doesn't keep that promise and instantly breaks the guy's neck, while the other man, still tied to the radiator, screams that he made the promise, and Joel knows he put so much fear in their heart that there's no way these men would lie about the location, and Joel proceeds to kill them both.
I believe him.
No, wait!
Now back to a passed out Ellie, who is then rudely awakened by David, who is about to just chop her into tiny little pieces as he promised. She bites his finger and screams that they can't cut her up and they can't eat her because she is infected. Confused and scared, David has no idea what she is talking about, and then she laughs because she just infected him too by biting his hand. She then shows the proof where she was bitten on the arm, and David and his right hand are not sure what to do with this situation, but in all this shock and confusion, Ellie takes the opportunity to escape, grabbing the cleaver, taking out one guy and getting out of the room, making it through this cannibal community during an intense storm. All odds against Ellie, moving building to building, trying to avoid the ambush against David's community, using the cover of the storm, and of course using what supplies she can to take down the men that are looking for her. Ellie is then backed into a restaurant where David is only a few steps behind her, where during this encounter they unfortunately set fire to the place. It's down for Ellie to use her size and outwit this man who is so desperately now trying to kill her for what he just did to his hand. There is this intense back and forth between Ellie and Joel, as Ellie is just trying to survive, and of course Joel is making it through the town, and the snow clearly isn't the only storm making its way through this community. Joel finds a closet full of people's clothes and belongings, and also finds Ellie's bag, thinking the worst, and this is when he realizes this is a cannibal community, finding the bodies of those who they were willing to eat next. This of course then speeds up Joel's pace, where he discovers the bar, which is now on fire, and of course that's the only place she could be next. Jumping back to Ellie awakened again, weak, crawling across the floor, trying to finish off David, but David is too quick for her. He is already unfortunately back on his feet, kicking her down, taunting her, climbing on her, violating her space, her safety. Everything she knew in her life is literally in his hands. Him trying to strangle her and choke her out, filled with rage, filled with hate, and she is luckily able to grab hold of a machete which had slid under the table during the encounter earlier on, slicing David into little pieces. The whole room goes silent and Ellie can only swing and keep cutting apart David, screaming, crying, covering herself in his blood. Shocked, scared, she is then grabbed and quickly saved from Joel, screaming for her life again, for her innocence, and she realizes that it's him, hugging him, squeezing him tighter than she's ever squeezed him before, and he kisses her on the head and tells her it's all gonna be okay and promises her she will never ever be alone again.
Ellie!
Did you hear me?
No. What?
Look, hospital. This is where we get off.
The end is in sight. She is oddly more quiet than usual, understandably so after what they've just experienced, but while there is a positive change in the air with Joel, he is so desperately trying to get her to have an active conversation with him about the future and promising to teach her how to play the guitar one day. With a spring in his step, mind the pun, he chuckles and calls Ellie kiddo as they make their way closer to the hospital, but Ellie is still distant in her behaviour, Joel becoming more worried and questioning if she is okay, and she just shrugs it off quietly, with him not knowing what to say or to do. One conversation of note does come up. She talks about a dream that she had. She was on a plane that was crashing, a plane filled with people. She's never been on a plane in her life, and in this dream she rushes to the cockpit to discover that there is no pilot, and she is then forced to land this plane filled with people. But just as she's trying to land and the plane is about to crash, she wakes up. This is interesting because it teaches us just how unhopeful Ellie has become. She's having nightmares about not being able to control their destiny and being able to save hundreds of lives like she's been told her blood will do. And maybe she's just understanding now that not everybody can be saved along the way, no matter how hard she tries, but she doesn't know the ending yet, hence why she always wakes up. Still trying to make it through the streets to get to the hospital, they must pass through an abandoned train station where Joel asks Ellie if she can grab a ladder which is out of reach, and despite her mind being pretty distant at this time, something grabs her attention, causing her to drop the ladder just in Joel's reach luckily, and runs off in amusement. Joel panics and shouts for her to come back, following her every step, and we hear what appears to be sounds of animals walking, and that's when we see it. Giraffes. Especially in the later half of this game, there's always a hope for hopefulness in the future, and this moment here encapsulates that feeling of the future Joel and Ellie are so desperately moving towards. Joel and Ellie see that nature and the world, despite what is happening, is still growing and still moving and is still learning to be something new and continuing to be just as beautiful as it was before the apocalypse. Ellie is so amazed and taken back by what she is seeing and what she was able to experience that she goes back to her old self, and those spirits lift again. Watching over Salt Lake City with the hospital just in view, Joel and Ellie take a moment and talk about the feelings, and that very same question from earlier is repeated here.
Is everything you were hoping for?
It's got its ups and downs. You can't deny the view, though.
These two this time have been through so much and the jury is no longer out. There's a beautiful end in sight for these two people to grow and to live and see what their relationship becomes as a father and a daughter. But despite this, Joel gets cold feet, not out of disbelief of the cause, but instead to understand if Ellie is okay to proceed. They could easily turn around, go back to Tommy's and continue with their lives and no one ever needs to know. But Ellie knows after everything she's been through, this is her life's purpose. This is exactly what her future was meant to be, and this is the reason she is here now. And no matter what happens, Joel promises one thing, that he won't leave there without her. Making their way closer to the hospital, there's a medical outpost which is set up in the streets, and this spurs on a conversation about Joel's past one last time. Joel talks about how he lived in a quarantined place like this shortly after Sarah died, and Ellie continues to push this conversation further, allowing his emotions and his feelings to truly feel expressed towards Ellie, and thanking her for caring and understanding what he's been through. But Ellie doesn't just stop the conversation there. She informs him that she was able to steal that picture from Tommy, which he offered Joel earlier on, that Joel once refused. This time Joel accepts the picture from Ellie and accepts that he can't hide or escape from his past, instead embracing what happened and moving forward and growing from that, changing a lot over the course of this adventure, learning so much about himself, his feelings, and learning from so many other people about the responsibilities and what can come from so many different relationships. It's this critical moment that feels so special because it's really what this game was all about. It's about Joel accepting every single lesson that came back to this one picture, came back to his past, and it allows him to move forward and allows them to go together and finish what they started as a family. But of course there's always a little bit of drama. Ellie and Joel are forced to make their way under a tunnel to make their way to the hospital, which is unfortunately filled with infected because this is a video game, you need something to do in these chapters, but also it's filling up with water, and Ellie has no idea how to swim, but Joel once again promises one day he will teach her how to swim. But for now, she is in big trouble. As they must make their way through this tunnel, there's a stream so heavy that it knocks them off balance, allowing Joel to get stuck inside a bus. Ellie desperately desperately trying to break him out, and you can only imagine how that goes for them. So close to the finish line, so close to ending all of this, and Joel and Ellie get swept away by one strong stream. Joel, in a panic, tries to swim after Ellie, who appears to be unconscious under the water, swimming and dragging her back to shore, trying to get her breathing again, but then two armed men show up and ask Joel to put his hand up, but of course, stuck in this situation, focusing on Ellie, making sure the same thing that didn't happen to Sarah happens to Ellie. Joel is trying to save her life, but Joel is then knocked out cold. Waking up in the hospital, Marlene is there, welcomes him, can't believe he's made it this far, and is amazed that him and both Ellie are still alive. Joel of course demands to see Ellie, but Marlene breaks the news to him. She is already being prepped for surgery. Of course he's confused because they just believed it was a blood transplant of some kind, but instead it turns out that this infection starts at the brain, and that's where they're going to have to cut it from. Killing Ellie, taking away her life, and this is the only way they believe it is possible to make this vaccine, and maybe they are right. Joel is determined that this doesn't happen, demands to get Ellie back, but is forced to the ground by the Fireflies and starts pleading just how important she is to him, but Marlene cuts him off there and then. She's known Ellie her whole life. She had to look after her, she knew her mother, she helped raise her. Marlene understands what Joel is going through and then some, but Marlene understands that the vaccine right now is more important than any personal feeling she has towards Ellie, because she needs to help save the world. This once again shows that side of Joel we seem to know, that selfish side, that side that he can't let go of, that side that he's always planning his next step to get what he wants, and in this case he wants Ellie back. Being led out by gunpoint, Joel thinks methodically about his next move, seeing his backpack and allowing him to quickly distract and take out the guard. Joel interrogates this Firefly ruthlessly to try and get directions to the operating room, quickly killing the guard and then battling his way through the hospital, killing hundreds of innocent people who were just willing to save the world so he can get a chance to finally save his little girl. One of the most interesting and talked about aspects of the story is of course Joel's near villainous intention to kill all these people just so he can save the life of one person. All these people were just trying to save the world. Joel is so willing to give all that up just to have a chance to save Ellie, but in doing that and getting his own selfish gain, he throws away what Ellie believed was her life purpose. He throws away the chance for the world to actually change just so he can save her life and make their life happier together and safer as father and adopted daughter. Everyone in this story lives in a grey area, and the morals aren't about what is right or what is wrong. It's about Joel being a father, learning about what being a father could mean to him again, and figuring out what he was going to do with those lessons that were taught to him throughout the narrative. And as a father figure, it makes you wonder, would you do the same? Making it to the operating room just as the doctors were about to begin surgery, Joel then proceeds, blinded by rage, to kill the doctor without any second thought of repercussions, grabs Ellie, puts her in his arms, carrying her just like he did Sarah at the beginning of the game, holding her close in his arms, comforting her with his softly spoken voice, saying, "I've got you." Running from the Fireflies just like he ran with Sarah, trying to desperately escape this hospital with the light of the elevator signaling a beacon of freedom to get out of there and to save her life. Just as they step out of the elevator, Marlene is one step ahead and already down in the car park, questioning Joel's intention, asking that he stops all of this madness, allow them to continue making the vaccine, and asking if this is what Ellie would even want in the first place. Joel has done many horrible things, and he's literally just caused the biggest crime against humanity, and without second thought he still shoots Marlene down, placing Ellie in the car, Marlene holding her gut, begging for her life, begging for Joel to stop, but he is cold, calculated, selfish, and he's aware of just how powerful the Fireflies are with Marlene around, so he blows her head off to make sure she doesn't come looking for him. Ellie finally awakes in the back of the car, Joel driving silently, calmly. She questions what happens, why are they leaving, why is she wearing a hospital gown? And Joel right then, us as the audience know, he lies in that moment. He claims that he was told by Marlene that Ellie isn't the only one. They turned up too late and they've already done plenty of tests on people who are just like Ellie, and she isn't anything special. She has no special purpose to save the world. She's just a normal girl and no vaccine could be created. So therefore they were able to leave. And just like that, he takes away what Ellie believed was her sole purpose and her way to make up what happened to her and mostly Riley. Ellie sits alone in the back of the car. It seems like time has passed, she's got a change of clothes, and they're back at the path that leads to Jackson City. Ellie is distant, contemplating, quiet, and confused. Joel, on the other hand, is talkative, laughing, joking about his age, talking about Sarah openly and how she would have gotten along with Ellie, and seeing Joel like this, so open, so hopeful and happy, is kinda unnerving to the point that Ellie seems to know there is something going wrong here. There is a breaking point and Ellie can't hold it in anymore. She tells Joel about what happened with her and Riley in the mall and how they promised that they would die together, and she's still holding on to that promise, and she's waiting for her turn to come where she can rejoin Riley and finally make her own death entirely worth it. Joel immediately responds and understands that feeling of holding on to that promise, holding on to that feeling of waiting for your turn. He for so long wanted to rejoin with Sarah, then losing Tess and making a promise to her, seeing Bill's grief and love eat him up, seeing Sam and Henry's responsibilities to each other keeping them going, and accepting to love the people you call your family. Joel is a very different man from the one we saw at the start of this game, and that's why he did what he did in the hospital. That's why he believed he saved Ellie. He found a reason to continue fighting. He found himself a new purpose. He realizes in this moment she has her own lessons that one day need to be learned, and he doesn't want her just throwing it away on a regret or a possible broken promise of a world that might or might not be saved. He wants her to find something to keep fighting for, very much like he found her. Ellie in this iconic moment is filled with so many emotions and isn't quite ready to hear or understand what he is saying, but she just wants one simple answer. What he said about what happened in the hospital with the Fireflies, was it true? He looks at her unblinkingly and says,
I swear.
She looks at him doubtfully, with fear, disappointment, not knowing what is true, but the one thing she is certain of, that she doesn't know what the future holds for their companionship and whatever consequences of the future may bring from Joel's actions. I've been meaning to talk about this one for a while. I've got a handful of videos. I'm hoping to sort of softly reboot the channel this year, so stick with me. But I'm glad I got this one off my chest, a nice big one to open the year. Replaying Last of Us Part 2 now that they've obviously got the remaster coming out, which I eventually will pick up and maybe make a part 2 to this video and explore the relationships inside that game and the way the game narrative structure reflects what happens in the first game. Because I think an interesting part of the first game is often overlooked, and it is those key elements of relationships that is seen throughout the chapters, and I just wanted to touch on that and just talk about it. But you know, it's Last of Us, it's timeless, and I love it personally, and I know many people have mixed feelings on the sequel, including myself, but I can't deny the original game is definitely one of my favorites of all time. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and of course I got more videos like this coming this year, and I hope to see you at the next checkpoints. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.